July 27, 1953.
Panmunjom, Koreo.
Lieutenant General William Harrison sits across from North Korean General Nam Il in a simple wooden building. The room is stifling. Outside, armies face each other across a strip of land already being called the demilitarized zone. Harrison has his pen ready. 24 hours ago, he received orders from Washington. Sign the armistice. End the fighting. Bring the boys home. But Harrison knows something that will haunt the next 70 years. This isn't a peace treaty. It's a pause, a temporary cessation of hostilities. Nothing is resolved. Nothing is settled. Korea will remain split. Families will stay separated. And technically, legally, the war will never end. He signs at 10 o'clock in the morning. Nam Il signs. Neither man speaks to the other. Neither shakes hands. 12 hours later, at 10 that night, the guns fall silent across the peninsula. 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days of fighting stops. 3 million people are dead. Korea is in ruins, and the war continues. 3 years earlier, the world looked different. June 24, 1950. Seoul, South Korea. It's a Saturday night. The city is alive with weekend crowds. American military advisors are at parties, drinking, dancing with Korean women. The embassy is quiet. South Korean President Syngman Rhee is at his residence, 70 miles south. His army, such as it is, has 10 days of ammunition. No tanks, no air force worth mentioning. The Americans promised to protect him, but only 98,000 troops are stationed in the entire country. At 4 in the morning on Sunday, June 25th, North Korean artillery opens fire along the entire 38th parallel. 200,000 soldiers pour south. They have Soviet tanks, Soviet artillery, Soviet training. Many of them fought alongside Mao's communists in China. They know how to move fast, hit hard, exploit chaos. The South Korean army disintegrates in hours. By Wednesday, Seoul has fallen. By Friday, American troops are scrambling to get into defensive positions. By the end of summer, UN forces, mostly American and South Korean, are pinned into a tiny perimeter around the port of Pusan. One more push and Korea falls. The dominoes everyone feared would start falling. But step back further. 1945. The Japanese surrender. Korea has been a Japanese colony for 35 years. Now it needs to be liberated, occupied, reorganized. At a late-night meeting in Washington, 2 young army officers draw a line on a map. The 38th parallel. The Soviets will occupy north of that line. The Americans south of it. It's meant to be temporary, just for logistics, for processing the Japanese surrender. The officers are Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel. Neither has ever been to Korea. They choose the 38th parallel because it puts Seoul in the American zone. That's it. That's the extent of the strategic thinking. A line drawn in 30 minutes with a ruler. The Soviets arrive first. They install Kim Il-sung, a young guerrilla fighter who spent the war years in the Soviet Union. He's 33, ambitious, a true believer. The Americans scramble to find someone to lead the South and settle on Syngman Rhee, a 70-year-old exile who's been living in the United States since 1912. Both men want to unite Korea under their rule. Both claim to speak for all Koreans. Both start building armies and waiting for their chance. The South Korean army disintegrates in hours. By Wednesday, Seoul has fallen. By Friday, American troops are scrambling to get into defensive positions. By the end of summer, UN forces, mostly American and South Korean, are pinned into a tiny perimeter around the port of Pusan. One more push and Korea falls. The dominoes everyone feared would start falling. But step back further. 1945. The Japanese surrender. Korea has been a Japanese colony for 35 years. Now it needs to be liberated, occupied, reorganized. At a late-night meeting in Washington, 2 young army officers draw a line on a map. The 38th parallel. The Soviets will occupy north of that line. The Americans south of it. It's meant to be temporary, just for logistics, for processing the Japanese surrender. The officers are Dean Rusk and Charles Bonesteel. Neither has ever been to Korea. They choose the 38th parallel because it puts Seoul in the American zone. That's it. That's the extent of the strategic thinking. A line drawn in 30 minutes with a ruler. The Soviets arrive first. They install Kim Il-sung, a young guerrilla fighter who spent the war years in the Soviet Union. He's 33, ambitious, a true believer. The Americans scramble to find someone to lead the South and settle on Syngman Rhee, a 70-year-old exile who's been living in the United States since 1912. Both men want to unite Korea under their rule. Both claim to speak for all Koreans. Both start building armies and waiting for their chance. November 27th. The temperature is 20 below zero. American and UN forces are spread out across northern Korea, unprepared for winter, low on supplies. That night, Chinese bugles sound across the frozen hills. Wave after wave of Chinese infantry attack. They come in human waves, overwhelming defensive positions through sheer numbers. They have fewer weapons than the Americans, but they know the terrain. They're used to the cold, and there are so many of them. The 8th Army begins what will be called the longest retreat in American military history. Thousands of troops fight their way south through mountain passes in sub-zero weather. At the Chosin Reservoir, 17,000 Marines are surrounded by 60,000 Chinese. They have to fight their way out, carrying their wounded, their dead, their equipment. Takes 2 weeks. The Marines make it, but they lose 900 men. Thousands more are wounded or suffer frostbite so severe they lose fingers, toes, entire limbs. By January 1951, Chinese and North Korean forces recapture Seoul. MacArthur wants to expand the war. Bomb Chinese bases in Manchuria. Maybe use nuclear weapons. President Truman says no. This stays a limited war. Police action, not World War III. In April, Truman fires MacArthur. The general gives a farewell address to Congress. Old soldiers never die, he says, they just fade away. Millions of Americans watch. Many think Truman made a mistake, but Truman knows something MacArthur won't accept. This war cannot be won in the way MacArthur wants to win it. Not without risking a global catastrophe. The war becomes something else, a grinding stalemate. The front lines stabilize roughly along the 38th parallel. Both sides dig in. It becomes trench warfare like World War I. Hills change hands multiple times. Battles get named after the hills. Heartbreak Ridge, Bloody Ridge, Pork Chop Hill. Men die for positions that have no strategic value except that the other side wants them. Private First Class Leonard Kravitz is at Pork Chop Hill in March 1951. He's 19, from Brooklyn. He's the only Jewish soldier in his company. When a grenade lands in his bunker, he throws himself on it, saves his squad, becomes one of the war's many Medal of Honor recipients. His parents receive his posthumous medal. Years later, his son becomes a rock star and names himself Lenny Kravitz to honor the father he never knew. The war drags on. 1951 becomes 1952. Peace talks begin at Panmunjom in a building that straddles the front line. Delegates meet. They argue about everything. The shape of the table, who sits where, the agenda, prisoner exchanges, where the border should be. The fighting continues while they talk. April 1951. Private Herbert K. Pililao, a Hawaiian soldier, is defending a position when his unit is overrun. He orders his men to fall back while he covers them. He kills 40 enemy soldiers in hand-to-hand combat before he's finally killed. His body is found surrounded by the dead. He was 23. November 1952. Dwight Eisenhower is elected president. He promised during the campaign to go to Korea. In December, before his inauguration, he flies there, spends 3 days visiting the front lines. He sees the stalemate, the frozen hills, the exhausted troops. He comes back determined to end it. Eisenhower lets it be known, quietly through diplomatic channels, that if the war doesn't end, he might use nuclear weapons. It's not a bluff exactly, but it works. In March 1953, Joseph Stalin dies. The new Soviet leadership wants to reduce tensions. China is exhausted. North Korea has lost a fifth of its population. Everyone is ready to stop, even if nothing is settled. The final battles are some of the bloodiest. Both sides want to hold the best positions before the armistice takes effect. In July 1953, 2 weeks before the armistice is signed, Chinese forces attack South Korean positions across a front of 20 miles. 4,000 South Koreans die in the last major offensive of the war. July 27, 1953, 10 at night. The guns stop. Soldiers on both sides stand in their trenches and listen to the silence. Some cheer. Some cry. Many just stand there, stunned. 3 years of their lives, gone. Friends dead. Bodies they'll never recover. And nothing is settled. Korea is still divided. No peace treaty. No resolution. Just a ceasefire. The numbers are staggering. At least 2.5 million civilians dead. Most of them Korean. 500,000 Chinese soldiers dead. 33,000 Americans, nearly 40,000 soldiers from other UN nations. North Korea lost perhaps 400,000 soldiers, but they've never released accurate figures. Entire cities are rubble. The North has been bombed so thoroughly that there are no targets left. The South is devastated, and the division becomes permanent. Families are separated by the DMZ. Brothers on opposite sides who will never see each other again. Parents who don't know if their children are alive. Children who grow up not knowing their parents. Millions of people cut in half. The Americans keep troops in South Korea. 28,000 today, 70 years later. The DMZ becomes the most fortified border in the world. Landmines everywhere. Guard towers. Artillery pointed both ways. It's 2.5 miles wide and 151 miles long. Nothing lives there except the wildlife that has reclaimed the space. It's become, accidentally, a nature preserve. One of the most biodiverse places in Korea. Tigers and bears and birds that are extinct elsewhere. Life flourishing in the space created by the threat of death. North Korea becomes the most isolated nation on Earth. The Kim dynasty, Kim Il-sung, then his son Kim Jong-il, then his grandson Kim Jong-un, rules with absolute control. No information gets in. No one gets out. The country develops nuclear weapons, tests missiles, threatens war. But the armistice holds. Barely. There are incidents. In 1968, North Korea captures the USS Pueblo, an American spy ship. In 1976, North Korean soldiers kill 2 American officers who were trimming a tree in the DMZ. In 1983, North Korean agents bomb South Korean officials visiting Burma. In 2010, North Korea sinks a South Korean warship. Each time, war almost starts again. Each time, it doesn't. The armistice holds. The temporary peace becomes permanent limbo. South Korea transforms. In 1953, it's poorer than most of Africa. By the 21st century, it's one of the richest nations on Earth. Samsung, Hyundai, K-pop, democracy eventually after decades of military dictatorships. Seoul becomes a city of 10 million people. At night, it glows with light. From the DMZ, North Koreans can see the lights. The South is prosperous. The North is dark. Satellite photos show the border as a line of light against darkness. The soldiers who fought there called it the Forgotten War. They came home to a country that had moved on. No victory parades. No national remembrances. Vietnam would overshadow it. World War II veterans got the glory. Korea was the war in between. The police action. The conflict. Not even called a war officially. But the veterans remembered. The cold. The fear. The friends they left behind in frozen ground. The prisoners of war who came home broken. The ones who never came home. Nearly 8,000 Americans are still listed as missing in Korea. Their families still wait. The armistice created something unprecedented. A war that exists in suspended animation. Technically, legally, the Korean War never ended. There's no peace treaty. Just an agreement to stop shooting. Both sides maintain they have the right to resume hostilities. Both sides claim to represent all of Korea. The conflict is frozen, like those Marines at the Chosin Reservoir, preserved in time. And the price is measured in generations. Korean families divided for 70 years. Occasional reunions arranged between family members from the North and South. Elderly people meeting siblings they haven't seen since childhood. Brief meetings, a few hours, then separation again. Forever. By now, most of those separated in 1953 are dead. The generation that remembers a united Korea is almost gone. The war that was supposed to contain communism didn't contain anything. It killed 3 million people and changed nothing except who ruled which half of a divided peninsula. The North stayed communist. The South stayed in the American sphere. The line stayed where it started, roughly along the 38th parallel. But it did something else. It established the template for limited war in the nuclear age. War with boundaries. War with restraint. War that can't be won in the traditional sense because winning might mean nuclear holocaust. Korea was the first test of that logic. Vietnam would be the second. Iraq and Afghanistan would follow. Wars fought with limited means for limited objectives. Wars that drag on because total victory is unacceptable and total defeat is unthinkable. Lieutenant General William Harrison, who signed the armistice, lived until 1987. He never spoke publicly about Korea, never wrote his memoirs. He kept the pen he used to sign the armistice in a desk drawer. a reminder of the war that never ended. In Panmunjom, the building where the armistice was signed still stands. It straddles the border, half in North Korea, half in South Korea. Tourists from the south can visit. They can stand at the border and look north. North Korean soldiers look back from a few meters away. Everyone is still armed. The war is still on, just paused, waiting. And 70 years later, the question remains. How do you end a war that's still fighting? How do you make peace when both sides claim everything? How do you reunite what has been divided for longer than most people have been alive? The armistice was supposed to be temporary, a pause before the real peace treaty. But temporary became permanent. The pause became the condition, and the war that was supposed to last weeks lasted years and continues, in a sense, to this day. The forgotten war. The war that never ended. 3 million ghosts waiting for a peace that never came.